Hello and welcome, this is Mouse Gunner, and in this video I'm going to be giving my first impressions of a game called Niche, a genetic survival game. Full disclosure, I did receive a key for this game for free from the developers. With that being said, Niche is a game that has been in early access for a little while now and has recently fully released. With that being said, I think it's best if we just jump right into the game and talk about what the mechanics are. So I have put about 4 hours in the game so far. I have a few different playthroughs going on at the moment, and you have up to 5 save files that you can use at any given time. The first save file I did was the campaign mode of the game, where more or less it's just like any other playthrough of the game, except you get a little bit of a tutorial introduction. And then the others were just to test out things. So let's go ahead and start a new game. So as I said, there's a story mode, and this is just mostly to give you a tutorial to learn how to play. And it's going to start you off nice and easy so that you can learn some of the game mechanics. Now, for me, I felt like the tutorial covered the basics of the gameplay, but there's a lot that was not covered. So I'm going to try and do my best to explain a lot of the gameplay mechanics. And then in my testing, I would try to play the sandbox modes a couple times. So I loaded in one of the medium islands here. So when you choose sandbox mode, you're going to have a choice of different difficulties, more or less, of your starting island and then what biome you're going to want to start in. So for example, with this playthrough here, I have medium islands and I went with first snow. So as you can see, just from that little picture there, or you might just be able to make out there's snow on the ground. Well, that's the biome. So it's kind of a chilly biome, and there are weather effects, and a weather effect that currently is going on in that playthrough is snowfall. So that's why the terrain is all covered in snow. So there's a number of biomes. So if we start off with a nice easy island, from what I understand with the way the islands work, when you load into an island, you can jump from island to island and you bring what animals with you that you choose. Up to, I think, a maximum of 10, give or take. And as you progress, you're going to move on to different biomes, and you're going to move on to more difficult islands as you go. So this is an assumption. I haven't played the game that far, but this is kind of what I'm gathering from what I have played. So with that assumption being put forward, I think if you start with easy islands, you will eventually progress to the harder islands as you go. So a lot of this depends on how you want to start. This is your starting island. As it says here, choose your start island. So this is the biome you'll start with. This is the biome difficulty-wise that you'll start with as well. With that being said, if we take a look at easy islands, we have Tiny Green, Peaceful Meadow, Grass Adventure, and Archipelago. So I don't know 100% what all of these different things mean, but I know for a fact this last one here is going to be smaller islands, so you're going to have a lot more water. And to get from one island to another, you're going to have to swim. So that is something that you will have to contend with. Moving on to the medium islands, you start to run into other biomes. So you've got the burning savanna, you have, as I mentioned earlier, your first snow, so you've got hotter climates, you have colder climates, and so on. So let's just start off with Peaceful Meadow, and we'll jump right in to the gameplay. Now, the main reason I would not recommend starting at that medium difficulty, especially with your first playthrough, honestly, you should play the story mode for your first playthrough, so you get that little bit of a tutorial. But another reason why you might not want to do that is because a big part of this game, as the title suggests, is it's about genetics and survival. So to survive in certain biomes, you're going to have to push your animals, and we have them right here, these two animals, which I consider a cross between like a fox and a cat. You're going to have to push your animals genetically in the direction to survive in that biome. And if you just start in that biome, you're not going to really have those things to take advantage of. Now, the gameplay is turn-based, and it's on a hex grid. So you can already see the hex grid, the different spaces we have here. Now, I do have a couple complaints of the game. The first complaint that I have is that I don't feel that there's really as many tooltips as there needs to be. As I'm hovering over these icons over in the lower right of the screen, I have no tooltips for this. Now, I know what these things mean now, but as a starting player, it'd really be nice to have tooltips here to let me know what these different things do, and unfortunately, there aren't any. So that is something that I hope that they change sometime in the future. I did mention this was an early access and it now is fully released, so whether or not the game will be much more developed beyond this, I am not sure, although the developer has indicated their desire to continue to develop the game. We don't know if there's going to be as much of a guarantee now. With that being said, if we select one of our two starting animals here by left-clicking on them, we get some information about them. So just going over this really quickly, again, tooltips, sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. We have a lot of attributes about our particular creature, animal, whatever you want to call it. First off, you have his name. You have his age. So here we have a tooltip that says he is 7 days old. All of the animals are going to have a lifespan of days. So we also have different phases of their lifespan. So right now we're in adulthood. Later, as we give birth to more animals, they'll start as infants and then they'll move through different stages of their life until they get into adulthood, which is their longest stage. And we see with 7 days old, there's also a remaining lifespans of 18 days. So every animal is going to have a lifespan of 25 days normally. There's going to be things that adjust this. The main thing that we see here, reduced by damage. So there's a interesting mechanic with this game where your animals do not have a amount of hit points. They don't have a health bar. Instead, anytime that anything happens that will damage them, they have their lifespan reduced. With that being said, every animal is going to have a number of stats. Some of these stats are going to determine how well the animal can survive in certain environments. There's also going to be stats to determine how well the animal will succeed at different actions. And then you have baseline stats like speed that's going to determine how far they can move in a given action. And you have a modifier here, so you have speed that's going to determine how well they can move on land. You also have swimming, which is going to determine how well they can move in water. And every map is an island, and some islands are going to have rivers like this, or creeks, or whatever, that you can also move through, and it's going to be your swimming stats that's going to determine how well you can move through that terrain. And as I was saying, you have stats that determine how well you are, or how successful you will be at an action. So collecting is going to determine how well you can pick fruit from trees, for example. Strength is going to determine how well you can attack for hunting purposes, for example, or maybe for self-defense purposes, other animals. Then you have fishing, and we can see fish right here. So if we wanted to succeed at the fishing action, then we would want to have a good fishing attribute. We have fertility, which is going to determine how successful you will be at mating. You have immunity stats, which we'll take a look at in more detail once we get into genetics. Your eyesight, hearing, smelling, and these are kind of passives, and we'll showcase that here in a little bit. Stealth. This is how well you can sneak up on creatures, again, for hunting purposes. And then you have some defensive traits. So you have camouflage, you have how much scent you give off. So this is how well you can be smelled by other creatures, your cold resistance, heat resistance, and so on. All right, and all of this is determined by your genetics. And the genetics are going to be a combination of your two parents, and there's a number of things that you can gain from your parents. So we already saw hearing, that's going to be determined by your ears, so you get some hearing stat through that. You could have horns, but for this particular creature we have no horns, so our genetics, no horns. We also have the recessive traits here that would be from the other parent. So in this case, neither end of the scale is this animal possible to have horns, but we can see a different type of ear. So we've got big ears, which gives us more heat resistance at the detriment of cold resistance, and also improves our hearing. We have our eyesight, which we have a recessive trait to be blind. So we lose all of our eyesight, but we gain smelling and hearing as an alternative. So it is possible that offspring of this animal could be blind. So that's something that we have to keep in mind. Now that's a recessive trait, but it's at least there in the genetic code. We have the snout type. So this is just the generic snout type, giving us a bit of smelling, but we can also have a snout type, and again, recessive, that gives us a cracker jaw, which allows us to have extra ability to crack nuts, for example. So that could be good for us. We have our body type. This is going to determine a lot of things about us, heat resistance, cold resistance, and what have you. And again, we have the same body type for both sides of both our dominant and recessive genes. We have our paws. Now, usually speaking, you're going to have 2 paws, so both of these traits are going to be active. So we have a runner leg, which is more or less your generic paw, and then you have a claw, which is why we have fishing and extra strength than normal. So that's good. That's going to allow us to do quite a bit of hunting and fishing with this particular animal. We have hind legs. In this particular case, it's just going to be the one dominant trait is going to take over. So we have hind legs, so that's going to determine speed and swimming ability. So you can have, for example, a webbed feet, which is going to give you more swimming skill. You have swimming tail. This is going to give us more swimming ability. You could have the basic tail, which is going to give you cold resistance, I believe. So that can happen. You have albinism. So we have no albinism, whether it be in our dominant or our recessive genes. There's also melanism. So this is something that can happen genetically. Then you have the color of your fur. A lot of this is just genetic. I'm not cosmetic, I mean. So color of your fur, color of your eyes, color of your horns if you have them, whatever pattern you may have, what color that would be. And then if you have a pattern, what it is. So in this case, we have no pattern as far as our dominant, but in our recessive, we have stripes. The pattern shape, so there's different shapes. Again, this is cosmetic. How dense that pattern is. This may be partially cosmetic and partially actually effective, depending on the type of pattern that you have, as some patterns do give you benefits. But I'm not positive on that exactly if how dense or the size of the pattern, if that has any effect of your camouflage or what have you. You have your blood clotting, so you can have hemophilia, which means that you have more damage from bleeding effects, or fertility. So both sides are factored in here, and in both cases we have high fertility, so that is going to determine our overall fertility stat. And then we have our immunity. Now, immunity is very important because if you have the same immunity trait in both sides, so if we had C for both of these, this would be an animal that would be sick. This is where inbreeding comes in. If you continuously just breed animals from the same family tree, you're going to have increased chance that eventually you will have the same immunity trait for both sides of things, and that will produce a sick animal, which will not have a very good lifespan. Moving on, we also have mutations. This is where we can push our genes a particular way. Now, a lot of these things are going to be locked away, and it's going to require you through the course of gameplay to do certain activities to gain the option to mutate these things. Some things you're just going to have to find. So it says invite animals with this gene to your tribe. So there's no way of me doing things to make this unlockable. So there's a lot of things hidden away that we can do. But for example, stripes are here. So if we want to gain stripes, well, we can push that mutation. So we're going to go ahead and select that. And once we've selected a mutation here in the slot, that's permanent. We can no longer change it. That has been set in stone. You can do up to 2 mutations in any given animal. And this is going to give you a little bit of a chance, as we can see here, 50%, of that mutation taking. So it's not guaranteed, but we already have a recessive trait of stripes. So we have a little bit more of a chance with this particular animal if we breed. Other things that we can see here, we have the sex of the animal. So this is a male. We have these 3 green pips that are the actions that the animal has, and you also see the pips on their chests. So this is a nice, easy indicator of how many actions you have with a particular animal, and how many actions an animal has is determined by at what point they are in their lifespan. So when they're infants, well, they don't have any action points. When they turn into babies or they're children, they only have 1 action point. When they're juveniles, teenagers, they have 2 action points. When they're adults, they have 3. And they can also breed once they become adults. And then finally, you have the family tree. Well, we don't have a family tree here to look at yet, but these are our two animals, and once they start breeding, we'll see a family tree. So we'll take a look at that in the future. So if we click on our other animal here real quick, we can see some differences between the two animals. So going through, we have medium ears, but we don't have a recessive trait for big ears. We have the normal eyes, or medium eyes, but we don't have the blind eye as a recessive trait. Instead, we have short-sighted eyes, which are kind of a middle ground between blind and the medium eyes. Our snout is pretty much the default on both cases. Body size is the same. Runner leg is the same here. So the chance that our children are going to pass on, or we're going to pass on that claw, is not maybe that as high because the runner leg is more prevalent. We have hind legs, we have swimmer tails, so that is on both of our animals, so it's very likely we'll pass that on. No albinism, no melanism, the different cosmetic things. So we see here, with this animal, the pattern is mask. Now, mask doesn't give you any benefits like stripes do. Stripes, when you're hiding in grass, which we can see all around here, you get a benefit. And again, that's recessive for us. Because we have a pattern, this animal has all of these other things now active, whereas before the other one did not. We have our blood clotting type, so it's normal for both cases, our fertility, and then our immunity. So we can see here AB is different than CD, so these two can breed without any risk of having a immunity problem for the children. All right, so now that we've gone over all the stats, let's actually get moving on our turn. So going over some other things that we have here over on our right, this is nesting materials. This is your ability to make a nest. Nests are required to give birth. The food, every animal is going to eat, I think, 1 food per population. I'm not positive on that, and there's no tooltip, so I have no reminder of that. You have how many animals we have, so we start with 2, so that's how many we have. And then we have our different perception types. So we have sight, which we have active now. We have hearing, or actually no, smelling, which we have active now. And then we have hearing. So you can either click on the button here, or you can use 1, 2, 3. So 1 is sight, 2 is smelling, 3 is hearing. So hearing is going to be usually very useful when you're hunting. So if there is a rabbit, they're not really rabbits, but they're more or less rabbit type animals. If there's a rabbit hiding in the grass, hearing is going to be a big way that we're going to find them. You can use smelling for that too, and we found a plant here that could have fruit on it. More than likely has fruit on it, so if we want to go pick some fruit, that's what we're going to want to do. Now, because if we look at the stats here, because the female here has 2 of the runner's paws, she has a higher attribute at collecting. She's not good at attacking, and she has no fishing attribute whatsoever, but she's better at collecting. So if we want to get some fruit, she's the one to send. So what I'm going to do for my turn is I can move any of the hexes that have a paw here. Now, if it has these dots, I have another action I can do beyond just moving there. So in this case, I could mate with our male. I could banish him. I can only do that if I have an alpha and that particular animal is an omega. Now I can choose it freely which are alphas and which are omegas by just clicking on this button here. So I've just made her the alpha female, and I could make her the omega if I wanted to, or the beta. So this is going to determine the priority of your animals. Alphas are going to eat first. So if you have less food than you have animals, the ones that are lower down the chain will starve before the alphas will always be the ones that get food, and the ones lower down the chain will be the first ones to starve. And this also gives you that ability, if you're an alpha, you can banish omegas. So if you have members of your tribe that you don't really particularly like because of their genetic attributes, you can banish them. They will stay on the map, and you can always re-invite them, but it will be a food cost. Inviting an animal into your tribe is a food cost. There's also going to be animals that we will encounter that we can invite into our tribe, and that's a good way to keep your genetics or your genetic diversity up so that you don't encounter that inbreeding issue. All right, now that we've gone over all that, let's go ahead. The 2 actions we can do here is we can clear the grass, which is going to give us a chance of finding more nesting material. We're going to need, I believe, 10 nesting materials to make a nest, and if we want to breed, we're going to want to build a nest. We can also find natural nests, which are oftentimes found somewhere hidden within the grasslands. But let's just go ahead and hop up on top of this hilltop. Now that took 1 action, so we see one of our 3 dots has been removed, or it's not as bright as it was before. And now we can see the fruit tree, and we can collect from the berry bush. We could also destroy the berry bush if we wanted to, but I don't know why we'd want to do that. And we just, there we go. And that was one of our actions. Now, we got 2 fruit because of our ability with collecting fruit. If we had a higher ability here, we'd gain more fruit. If we were to send our male to do the same thing, they'd probably only get 1 fruit because of their less collecting skill. So that's where these traits come into importance. We also have camouflage. Now, because we're hiding in grass, we have a camouflage of 2. If we had stripes, which we'll probably want to push with our genetics on the other side of things. So if we choose stripes here, if our offspring have stripes, they'll have increased camouflage for being in the grass, so they'll be even harder to spot. That'll be very important if we want to hunt. All right, so let's go ahead and get our mating on. So we have 1 action point left. We don't want to use that with our female because we want to be able to make a nest, so we're going to use our male. E is going to mate. You can do either or, either the female or the male can initiate the mating, but that takes up 1 action point, so we're going to do that. So every time you mate, there's going to be a roll to see how successful it is. Because both of our animals have high fertility, it's pretty much a guarantee. Now, if we select our female, we can choose to make a nest. And we're going to want to end the turn in a nest if we want to give birth. Otherwise, we'll just stay with the pregnant state. So let's go ahead and build that nest. And whenever the animals put their head down like this, they are done. All of their action points have been expended, and you can really easily see that by the fact that the animals that still have action points, their heads spin around. Now, the other criticism point that I'll have outside of the tooltips is the fact that grass is all over the place, and as far as I know, there's no way to remove it from the view, or at least lower it from the view so it's less obtrusive. This makes it sometimes very difficult to actually see what's going on, and it is easy to lose your animals. So that is one thing that I really hope that they change sometime in the future. I'd like to see some representation so we know the grass is there, but it'd be nice if they lower it a bit so that you could maybe see a little bit better. Now, I know why it's there. It's to make things that you can't see with your eyesight harder to pinpoint, so that you're going to have to rely on your sense of smell and your hearing more, but it still is kind of a frustrating mechanic. Now, with our male, we definitely want to, if we want to continue to get food so that we can feed our tribe, we want to hunt here with him, because that's what his traits are. The fish have moved. Other creatures, other animals like little rabbits and the fish, they'll move around as you move. So that is something that you're going to have to keep an eye on. So I don't believe the fish are still here. They might be still here and I just can't see them, or I can't perceive them. So I can do a couple different things. I can stay along the beach, which I'll probably be able to move through better to try and find rabbits or fish, but I will be more visible. Or I could go through the grass, but I'd be slowed down by my need to explore it because I can't see very well. So as you can see, I can move quite far along the beach, but if I were to move into the grass, my distance I can move is a lot lower. I think a lot of that has to do with you have to explore an area of grass before you can really truly move through it at a faster speed. There's no real indication of what has been and hasn't been explored, at least not an obvious one to me. Let's go ahead and move along with our 1 action point along here. So we have a possibility to dig. Unfortunately, we don't have a trait that benefits us as far as digging. So whenever an attribute or wherever something is yellow like this, I believe it's indicating that an action that you're not particularly good at. You can do it if you want, but there's a good chance that you'll fail at it. I'm going to continue to turn on my ears every so often just to see if we can find any other animals, and I think we're going to move along the beach. It's important, I think, in the early stages of the game to continue to breed so that you're getting your population up so you can do more things. And all we need to do now is either hit this button up here or press the space bar and we end our turn. And there's a day progression, and we've popped out a new baby. Now the baby, when they are first born, when they're infants, they have no action points, so they will not move, but you can at least take a look at them and to see what happened as far as their genetics. So it looks like, just visually speaking, stripes did pass on because we were able to push that mutation. So we can see here that stripes are a thing, and if we look at the stats, we can see camouflage is now extremely good for this animal. It's hiding in grass, it's got the pattern camouflage, and it apparently also has a bonus for its color. So that's where the cosmetics, I guess, can be important to a certain extent. Because it's an infant, it's going to have, as long as it's a baby, which it will be a baby for this turn and its next turn, it will have a reduced stats for movement and swimming. So this baby is very well hidden. But again, looking at the genetics here, we can see some things. So B and D is the immunity traits that passed on. At least one of these are going to pass from one parent. So we had A, B from one parent, C, D from the other parent. So we grabbed B and D. So if these two parents mate again, and instead of BD, it's AC, well then that offspring could, as long as the sex permits, could mate with this offspring, and inbreeding wouldn't be as much of an issue. But if they grabbed either B or D, then it would be an issue, because there's always that chance that you'd have the two matching. Now, we do see here, though, that short-sighted eyes passed on. Even though that was recessive, it did pass on, and we also gained the recessive trait of our other parent, blind eyes. So the likelihood that we might have blind children is still there, at least with this one. We now can see the family tree as well, and we see links between the parents and the offspring. So whenever you click on a particular animal, you're going to see, when we click on this female here, we see its offspring. When we click on the child, we see its parents. This is a good way of keeping track of your family tree and avoiding any inbreeding if you choose. All right, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and continue to do things with our adults. Now, as far as I understand, you have to wait until the baby, the next turn, so that the baby can move out of the nest, then you can breed again. I'm not positive of that. I've never actually tried to see if I were to move, for example, over here. Could we breed with our male again? We wouldn't be able to go into the nest, though, so it would be a moot point. So we're going to have to wait a turn regardless anyway. So because we're going to have to wait, I'm going to use my turns to pick the fruit. Now, you can expend the fruit trees, as we've done now. So there's only going to be so much fruit on the fruit tree. And once you go through that, usually you have to wait for rains or just for the fruit tree to replenish itself. I keep calling it a tree. It's a berry bush, technically. You're going to have to wait for it to replenish itself. Now, trees themselves will give you the possibility of nuts, but you have to have cracking trait to really have any success at being able to do anything with that. Now, with our last action, we can do something else here. We can, for example, pull some of this grass, and this grass, if we pull it, gives us a chance of getting nesting material, which is going to allow us to build more nests in the future. Now, we can find natural nests, as I mentioned earlier, but for now, until we find those, this is going to be the best way. So we're going to want to keep our male somewhat close. Okay, so we actually have the means to hunt now, because we can hear there are some moles here. Now, they may be in their burrows. I can't really make it out. Let's see if we can see them with vision. We can. It looks like they may be up. Unfortunately, if I take a look at my smell, we can see that there is another berry bush. I can't move into a berry bush space. So probably the best attempt we can make here is to try and kill this mole here. Problem is, we have good hunting attributes with this animal, but we do not have stealth attributes to help him out too much, though. So it's quite possible that these guys will see me coming, and the problem with the moles is they usually are in burrows, and if they sense that you're coming, they will go down to the burrow, and there's nothing you can do about that once they've done that. They are more or less protected. So that can be an issue with hunting. Now, if I move just out in the open, this guy's for sure probably going to see me, and I'm not going to have much of a chance to hunt him. But if I try and go through the grass, it's going to take all of my actions to do this hunting. So I really have to make up my mind one way or the other what I want to do here. So I think I'm going to try for the hunt. So I'm not sure. It looks like the mole did move, but I'm not sure if he's in his burrow or not. So we're going to find out here. All right, so he was able to hear me or sense me in some way, so he dropped down into his burrow. So unfortunately, that means I'm not going to be able to kill him. But I am here, so I might as well collect some fruit from the berry bush, and this is going to showcase perfectly the difference between collecting skill, as we only get one fruit from this particular animal. So we're going to sit here for this turn. Hopefully this mole will pop back up so we can try and kill it, but if it doesn't, we can always just move on. All right, so let's go ahead and end our turn. Turns are going to be very fast once you get the idea of how the game plays. But now we have our baby has action points, so now it can move. Now it's still considered a baby, so it only has one action point. It's going to have reduced movement. So I'm just going to go ahead and move it over here into the grass. Because it's in grass, it should still be fairly camouflaged. Now at this stage of the game, because we're on an easy island, we don't really have that many threats. We don't have the threat of weather. We also don't have the threat of prey. Or, I'm sorry, yeah, predator animals is what I was trying to say there. Us being prey to a predator animal. Now, I haven't really encountered much outside of a hawkish type creature that flies overhead. I think your young animals have a threat of being picked off by that. But I've never actually seen it happen, so I'm not exactly sure the circumstances, but I'm guessing if it's able to spot you, he'll pick you off. I've also seen the weather mechanics, so an element of your animals, if they group together, they are able to warm themselves. So by clustering together in a group, in a colder climate, you can warm yourselves so that you don't freeze to death. So that's going to be an important thing to do in survival situations. I don't know if it's because this is a baby that doesn't happen, or if it's the fact that there's just not enough animals around to give that heating effect, but I do know that that is a thing that can happen. So we're going to want to bring our male over to mate. Unfortunately, I probably moved the baby in a way that was not particularly intelligent because it's going to require me more action points to get over to my female. Let's see, do we have, if we look at our, so this guy is still down in his burrow, I believe, because we don't have an action to attack him. So I'm going to move over to our female. We're going to mate with her again. I'm going to use her action point to do so. I think I'm going to move over this way so we can start moving this way if we want. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm going to move right here. We're now going to select the female. We're going to use her to mate so that we're not wasting the male's action points. And we're going to, oh, we found a natural nest. Oh, it's right next to the one that we built. So we could have saved ourselves resources if we had done a little bit more exploration. I think I'm going to go ahead and I continue to have my ears on to look for any animals that we may be able to hunt. And then while our female's in the nest, we're going to want to end the turn here. So for now, we're just going to go ahead and collect more fruit. And I think I'm going to go ahead and pull the grass from that bush. Now, when you see the grass like this, I think it's indicating that it will regrow. When you don't, I think that it's permanent, the removal. So that is something to keep in mind. All right, so let's go ahead and end our turn. And here comes the rain. And the rain is going to replenish all of the different berry bushes. So we can see it's now fully stocked. And we have ourselves a new baby. So we can see with this one, unfortunately, the stripes, although we did try and push that mutation, it did not take. Instead, the mask from the female took from the mother. And we see the immunity traits of B and C pass. So unfortunately, we have B as commonality between those two. And now this is a teenager, so we have 2 action points to use. So now this animal is more useful to us from the standpoint of exploration and doing things. We also want to eventually have her mate, which we'll be able to do once she gets into her adulthood. You can also use tab to move from animal to animal. I don't believe this will work on newlyborns, but we do see that the claw passed on from the father, which is nice to see. So we will have some hunting and fishing ability with this animal, and we do have a male, so now we have a sustainable younger population. We could mate these two if we wanted to. Of course, we do have that immunity issue that could possibly be a problem. All right, so let's go ahead and finish out this turn just collecting our food. And we're going to be able to spend our full turn on that when a berry bush is fully stocked. That's something usually you can do. We're going to use the female here to do a bit of exploration. So we see the cracking action open. So there is a nut in this space, probably fallen from the tree that's right here. But again, it's yellow because we don't have a high chance of being able to pull it off. So we're just going to continue to move for now. But that is a source of food that we could possibly get. And you can also use an action point to shake the tree, and this will make more nuts possibly fall down so that you can continue to eat those. Other things that you can find roots, which I actually have found right here with our smelling. So this is something you can use the digging skill to dig up, and then that is a source of food. As far as I know, once you dig up the roots, though, they do not replenish, but I'm not positive on that. Okay, so let's go ahead and have our ears on so we know where any hunting sources could be. I also want to keep my eyes out for fish, which I don't think we'll be able to hear necessarily. Now, I don't want to go too far with the male because of the possibility of wanting to mate again. But let's say we just get some more fruit here. Right now, we don't have that big of a population, so hunting is not going to be that big of a deal. And also the biome we're on, we're going to find berry bushes very commonly. Now in other biomes, like the wintry one that I have, survival's a lot harder and hunting was much more of a thing that was necessary because finding prey animals was much easier to do than finding berry bushes because of the more desolate terrain. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, to jump to a different island, what you need to do is you need to find these warp points. So these stones that are here, what you do is you just move an animal and you use one of your actions to activate it. And then every animal that's within its zone, so you can really easily see the zone here, any animal that's in this zone will move along. Any animal that you don't have in this zone will be left behind and you pretty much lose. So that's more or less how you progress from island to island. So we can see there's a number of different warp points. I don't know this for certain, but from what I've seen of the warp zones, you have different appearances. And I think these appearances indicate the biome you'll be jumping into. As I said, I don't know this for certain, as I haven't had enough opportunity to test this. But as you can see, this warp zone and this warp zone look the same, so I believe these are going to be similar biomes here, and then this one looks a little bit different. And I've seen different visual representations for these warp points that lead me to believe that these are indeed the indicators of the biome. So you have a little bit of an indicator of where you'll be jumping to. All right, with that being said, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up my coverage of Niche. It's a very interesting game, and I consider it to be a pretty fun, chill experience. So you go through the turns and you mess around with genetics and you just have a little bit of relaxing fun. Now in the harder islands, survival can be quite a bit more difficult as you're having to contend with less chance of getting food. You are having to contend with the environment itself, it either being cold or hot, and depending on the genetics of your animals, the traits that they have, they may have advantages or disadvantages surviving in a particular environment. So, for example, our animals that have the stripy pattern's great, but it works best in this grassland, and that's where we're going to have the best advantage. So if we move to a different biome that we don't have this huge expanse of grasslands, well, that's going to be less of an advantage for us. So that's something that we're going to have to deal with. Also, if we build our animals along the lines of having a lot of heat resistance and we end up in an environment where it's cold, well, we're going to be in trouble. So that's kind of the element. Now, outside of the two issues I've stated before where tooltips could be a little bit better, and I would like a way to be able to reduce the grass down so you could see a little bit better. At least if there is a way, I'm not aware of it. But another thing that I kind of feel as a possible criticism is it doesn't seem like there's that many options as far as the different attributes your animals can have. And also the genetics in themselves can be a little bit, it can be difficult to tailor them as much as you would like. So you might say, oh, well, I really like the idea of hunting, so I want to have this claw be commonplace. Well, the issue is with the mutations, you're very limited, especially in the early game, so it takes quite a while before you can actually force that with a mutation. And a lot of the mutations that you have from the beginning are either very generic or cosmetic or actually kind of bad. Like deformed paw is bad. You don't actually want this. So why you would want to mutate it, I have no idea outside of just doing it to do it. Because you're going to lose all of the attributes of the runner leg. So this is an attribute-less paw, so obviously bad. Other things like hemophilia, why would you want to mutate for that? That's a bad attribute, but you don't have normal blood clotting. So through the case of finding another animal that's outside your tribe and recruiting them to their tribe, if they have hemophilia, you can't mutate them out of it. You're just going to have to try and breed them out of it, and then that's just a roll of the dice. So there can be challenges to this. Now, eventually you can unlock this through as it says here, a number of generations. So once you get through enough generations, you survive long enough, well, then you can mutate to have normal blood clotting. So you can remove any of that may be in your animals. Also, again, with fertility, all you can mutate for is low fertility or infertile, which is obviously bad. You want to be able to have high fertility, but that's not something you can initially do. So it does take time for that, but as I said, it's kind of a slow build-up for that. Your mutations take quite a while before you can actually tailor. So you're really just having to rely a lot on the die rolls. And on top of that, it's kind of random what animals you're going to encounter that you could potentially breed with. They may have, you know, pretty much anything under the sun, and that may not necessarily be something that you want. So if you're in a colder climate and you run across an animal that has a bunch of attributes that are for warm climates, well, that's not going to really play in your favor. But at the same time, you have the inbreeding issue. So you're going to have the incentive to continue to breed outside of your starting animals so that you don't have inbreeding issues. So that kind of forces you to recruit animals from outside of your tribe to continue. Now, you don't necessarily have to do that. If you encounter a male animal that's not in your tribe, you can mate with them with a female and you don't have to recruit them. But as far as I understand, if you encounter a female, you do have to recruit them. Otherwise, the AI-controlled animal will, even if you do mate with them, they will get pregnant. They will never sit down in a nest and give birth to that child. So unless you recruit the female, as far as I know, there's no way to get that infant to be born. So that is kind of an issue in and of itself. But as far as that goes, with females, you can continue to grow your population without having to recruit outsider males. So that is kind of an interesting dynamic. But in any case, I hope you guys have enjoyed this first look and first impression of the game. This is Mouse Gunner, signing out.